Hello, Sunderland fans. Welcome to another edition of the On the Whistle YouTube series. Unfortunately, my friend Phil Smith isn't available today to record the On the Whistle video. Many congratulations to him. He has just proposed to his partner Beth, and thankfully she said yes. So, Phil, we wish you all the best. I think we're up in Edinburgh at the moment. Looking forward to seeing you as the new season starts. Another bit of housekeeping as well. Massive shout out to Ben Cook. It was his birthday today, but not only was it his birthday, he actually ran 50 miles for the Bradley Lowry Foundation in between the stadiums of Sunderland, Middlesbrough, and Newcastle. Absolutely monumental achievement, Ben. Over the moon, you managed to get it done, and yeah, amazingly proud of that achievement. So Sunderland played today two pre-season friendlies under new head coach Regis Labrie. We won 5-0 at South Shields. And then we lost 2-1 at Gateshead. Both friendlies played on the same day. Lots of changes in between the squads, a lot of overlap as well in terms of the young players that came on. But I'm going to dive straight into it and I'm going to start answering some questions. Please bear with me. I'm not as good as Phil. I don't pretend to be as good as Phil, but we're going to give it a stab. Let's see what we've got. Michael Bowers, friend of the On the Whistle series, says, how important is it for fans one way or another not to overreact to results? It's the first day of pre-season. There's still 4 weeks until the Cardiff game. I think this is a very pertinent point. I mentioned on social media, I've seen Sunderland do well in Dortmund under David Moyes. We thought everything was going to be okay. And then we got relegated that season. A social media user pointed out to me that we did very well under Paolo Di Canio one pre-season, and then it went, badly wrong for him. Excuse me. So you can't read too much into pre-season. There's a lot sort of at play in terms of topping up minutes, in terms of players coming back from the holidays. It's under a new manager, trying a different system. Perhaps to what Mike Dodds and Michael Beale had, different expectations, different roles. And I think as well, the Gateshead game today, you look at that midfield, the midfield that started, Embleton, Job and Matete. Don't get me wrong, that is a midfield that should be able to beat Gateshead. So it is a failure in that sense that they haven't been able to do so, but it's very unlikely that those three players are going to play together in a championship game. It was a little bit of an experiment. That wasn't Sunderland's strongest 11. Yes, they did have some big hitters out there. There's no denying that. Jack Clark played, scored the penalty. Roosen cost Sunderland a lot of money. He managed to win the penalty. There were some big hitters there. 09, the captain, Adji Alisi. And yes, Sunderland probably fell well below their expected levels for a championship game. But it is only the second game. They've got a camp in Spain coming up. They've also got potentially another friendly in England after the Blackpool and Bradford game. So there is a long way to go. The proof will be in the pudding when the championship season rolls around. And the South Shields game against lesser opposition, it must be said, was a bit of a walkover. So I think to answer your question, Michael, you can't get too high and you can't get too low over pre-season. You've just got to sort of take it for what it is. It's about fitness. It's about building minutes up. And I'll use this example of last year. Last year, we did exactly the same thing. We played South Shields and Gateshead on the same day. We had signed a striker by the name of Hemir. Hemir played up front against South Shields. He looked very good. I was very impressed. I was ranting and raving about him. He ran the channels well. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, that pre-season form didn't translate into success during Sunderland's regular championship season. So it is very hard to judge. There's a lot that can happen. And Regis Labrie, he's only a couple of weeks into the job as well. So there is that to contend with. Ethan Todd, another friend of the show and the Raw podcast, said, who impressed you the most and who concerned you the most from both of today's games? I'm starting to sound a little bit like a Chris Rigg fanboy, but he really stood out for me today. His intensity for a friendly was almost a level above the rest of his teammates today. And that's not a knock on them. He just had the bit between his teeth. He's so eager and so young, so talented. He just wants to prove himself. It almost feels like now he's signed this 3-year deal that he wants to prove himself again and let everybody know that he's worth it. He won the ball a couple of times in the middle today. And what's interesting as well is Regis Labrie played him central midfield along with Dan Neil. Now, cast your minds back to last season. Chris Rigg was playing off the right-hand side. The role Patrick Roberts played today against South Shields off the right wing, that was to sort of minimise his impact in games because he was quite young, and it is quite young, and decision-making, if it's not on point, can really let you down in the Championship. So that was probably a move that needed to happen, but make no bones about it, Chris Rigg has signed at Sunderland for 3 years to play in his preferred position and to play regularly. So that really, really interests me, that Dan Neil, Chris Rigg sort of partnership, whether that could develop. I thought Adil Ushish off the front man was very good at South Shields. A shout out for Mayenda as well, who did what he had to do. It was a good showing from the young striker. He's had a tough time of it, I think, going out on loan to Hibs, not getting many games. He's come back, adjusting to a new club, a new culture, a new country. Hopefully he can kick on. He is still very young. I would like to see Sunderland still sign somebody in that position. But he absolutely impressed. Off the bench as well, Ben Crompton coming on, did well. Trey Hume always looks lively. Patrick Roberts, good to see him score a goal. I think somebody mentioned that it had been over a year since he'd scored. So that was fantastic to see, because if we can get Patrick Roberts back to full fitness and full speed, that would be amazing. Ethan also asked as a second part of this question, who concerns you? I wouldn't say anybody particularly concerned me. Matete didn't quite look up to scratch, but he had an injury at Oxford. His loan was cut short, so he's just coming back. Joe Bellingham, I think, had an off day against Gateshead. That's fair to say. I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned about him. I'm interested to see where Regis Labrie plays him. He played as a number 10 today, but I think possibly his attributes aren't best suited to that at times. I think possibly as a number 10, he maybe slows the ball down a little bit when he doesn't have to. Whether he can work on that and improve on that, I'm not sure. So I'm interested to see what happens to Joe Bellingham. The caveat to that is that Joe Bellingham has got so much talent, so much sort of raw power, raw pace, physical attributes. He is intelligent as a footballer as well. So I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned, despite the bad performance. It is pre-season at the end of the day. O9 and Elise didn't really cover themselves in too much glory, but again, it's just pre-season. Hopefully they're getting back up to speed. Although I will say it was good to see Dennis Serkin back from his injury. Another little boost for Regis Labrie. We know how good a player he can be when he's fit and firing. Elliot Embleton as well. To answer Ethan's question, was I concerned by Elliot Embleton? No. Did he have a great game? No. But it was nice to see him playing back. People forget how long he's actually been out injured. So with all these players, there's little bits of caveats here and there. Nasri Rusin won the penalty. He didn't really impress me against Gateshead other than that, to be honest. But again, he's coming back from an injury that kept him out for a couple of games towards the back end of the season. Jefferson Bennett had that, that unsatisfactory loan to Greece. That didn't work out. He picked up an injury towards the back end of his time, so he's just feeling his way back in. He looked bright in places, but it wasn't by any means the best game. So there's all these little caveats, I think, and I think possibly related to Michael's question as well. Just need to sort of relax about it a little bit. And the proof is in the pudding at the end of the day when it comes to the Championship. I would be more concerned if these sorts of types of performances become a habit in pre-season, but we'll have to wait and see. Terry asks, why do you think we haven't went for Kiefer Moore at £2 million asking price? All strikers today showed nothing to be impressed about. I understand your point, Terry, but I sort of disagree. I think Mayenda did have a good game, a promising game. Now, I'm not saying he could reach the levels of Kiefer Moore this season. I don't think he would do that. But I think he did have a good game and show some positive signs. Rusin as well, I mentioned he was poor, but he did win the penalty. There's clearly a player there. Whether he's best suited off the left, which is a position Clark's occupying at the moment, or whether he can play through the middle is another question. I think £2 million for a 31-year-old, you've got to balance that and say, is it worth it? Could he potentially get you promoted? Is he the type of striker that you want, or is wages going to be cumbersome? Probably all questions better suited to Christian Speakman. I know Sunderland were obviously very keen to get him on loan, possibly even a permanent deal in January. That didn't happen. He went to Ipswich. He helped fire them to promotion. They also had a lot of other good strikers, by the way. So it's a really tough one. Despite Mayenda's decent performance, you've got to think that Sunderland will add experience to the striking department. They've got to. It's been a problem for so long, and it actually predates Ross Stewart's exit from Sunderland. Sunderland needed a striker before Ross Stewart was injured and before Ross Stewart left, because Ellis Sims was only a loanee. They have signed strikers, you must say, but it's been more inexperienced. So it's for sure, Terry, a position that needs to be addressed. I would just slightly disagree with your statement that the two strikers that played today didn't show anything. I thought they did, albeit not something that would be enough to carry us into a championship season, if that makes sense. Peter asks, why did we have a keeper on trial? We have enough in the armoury. This is a really, really, really interesting question. I've seen a lot of people ask it, and it's an absolutely fair question. So the lad we have on loan from Stoke at the moment, his first name is Blondie. I can't quite pronounce his two last names. I'm not going to try. So for the purposes of this video, he's going to be called Blondie. He's on trial at the moment. There's been reports that he's been offered a deal. As I understand it, he hasn't signed that yet, although there's always a chance by the time this video goes out that could have changed. So he's been sort of courted, if you will, because Sunderland are probably going to send a couple of their goalkeepers out on loan this season. Simon Moore has come in to be backup to Anthony Patterson to provide cover competition and add experience to the goalkeeping group. Anthony Patterson isn't expected to leave. The caveat to that is, if a big club came in with a lot of money and an attractive deal for Anthony Patterson, then he could go. That is a possibility. But at the moment, as things stand, he's expected to stay. The player's expected to stay. He's not pushing for a move. He's happy and settled, and he's happy to be playing regular football. So you have Anthony Patterson, Simon Moore. Now you have that third goalkeeping spot, which could, in theory, be occupied by Matt Young, who was on loan at Darlington last season. Very highly rated, England youth international, could be the next best thing. Now he's expected to go out on loan to an AFL club after doing really well at Darlington. That's the next stage in his development. So he's unlikely to be that number 3 pick. Dan Cameron has signed a professional deal at Sunderland. He's very, very young. He's probably going to play for the under-21s. And Robert Nichols, in his statement, the academy manager, when Dan Cameron signed, said they'd like to get him out on loan into the National League at some point. So we can expect that to happen. There's also Kelechi, another player whose last name I can't pronounce, the ex-Leicester City goalkeeper. Chibuwetsi, I think he's called. I'll have to ask that, actually. He's more of an under-21 keeper. He will form part of the senior goalkeeping group at times. But he's not expected to sort of come in and compete to be a number 2 or a number 1. So that leaves Adam Richardson. Adam Richardson, they were looking to loan him out before he was injured towards the back end of last season. Then he played predominantly for the under-21s as they got to the Premier League 2 Cup final. They're going to be looking for another loan for him as well. So basically, if you loan those players out, they might not all go out on loan at once, but it could be at various points of the season. Matty Young, Dan Cameron, Adam Richardson. That would leave you with Kelechi playing for the under-21s, and then Simon Moore and Anthony Patterson above him. So that would leave a few gaps up and down the system, throughout the age groups. So the former Stoke City man would just come in, provide a little bit of cover and competition, would allow Kelechi to play for the under-21s. Blondie, he could also play for the under-21s as well. And it would just be that little bit of insurance, a little bit of a goalkeeping sort of training signing and developmental signing, just as that little bit of protection to then allow Sunderland's young, promising goalkeepers to go out on loan. But I completely understand the question, because on the face of it, it does seem a bit puzzling. But I think it's more just as a sort of last resort's unfair. But just sort of a safety net, and somebody to keep the current lads at the club on their toes. Mike Smith says, any crack from Regis Labrie? Well noticed, Mike, but he hasn't done a post-match press conference or spoken to the media, but I believe he's going to do something with the club on Monday, so have a look out for that. My colleague Joe also spoke to a couple of players after the Gateshead game, so look out for that as well. Let's look at another question. Cam Rogers says, do you see Mayenda getting a fair crack as backup if he kicks on? Also, do you think a mobile centre forward similar to him but more polished will be targeted? I could see Mayenda getting a fair crack. I don't see him being number 1 coming into the season. I would be disappointed if I saw him if I saw him start for Sunderland come the beginning of the season, unless he starts to really rip up trees. I just think he's a little bit too young, a little bit too inexperienced. Could he play back up to an experienced man? Yes, absolutely. Could he come on and start a couple of games, maybe rotate in and out? Yes, absolutely. But do I think we can hang our hat on my end at the moment? No. Could he form part of the squad? Yes. He could probably do with another loan, I'd imagine, so he plays week in, week out. But I think a lot of people underestimate how important it is to play week in, week out. Matty Young was a brilliant example of that last year at Darlington. Playing week in, week out really helped his development. We've seen it at Sunderland, Dan Neil, Anthony Patterson, Jack Clark, Patrick Roberts. When they play week in, week out, it does improve them. So Mayenda, I think, needs that experience. Will we sign a centre forward? Absolutely, I think so. What form that centre forward comes, I'm not sure. Cameron also asks, do you see Job knocking Adila, Shush, Brown, Neil, or Rigg from that midfield three? I think you meant to include Ekwa as well. It's a really good question. Sunderland all of a sudden look like they have some decent options in the middle of the park. Alan Brown obviously didn't play against Gateshead or South Shields, so he's sort of working his way back to fitness after the summer. But yeah, it's a really interesting question on Brown. Is he going to play further forward, or is it time in his career to now drop back? I'm not sure. Where does Regis Labrie see Job? Has that changed after the Gateshead game? I'm not really sure. There is competition for places. As I said earlier, I really like Neil and Rigg as that midfield too, and Adil Oshish did look good as the number 10. So there's real options there now, albeit that was against lower league opposition. I've probably copped out of that question a little bit, but it is an interesting sort of caveat to Sunderland's pre-season so far. Let me just check to see if I've got any other questions. I've been talking now for 16 minutes, which is probably too long. I think that's about it, actually. So yeah, thank you once again for listening, watching all of the videos. Thank you if you've made it this far through, because England do play in the European Championship finals tomorrow. So if you're watching this video, I appreciate it, because it's done well to cut through all of the noise surrounding that. Once again, congratulations to Phil, congratulations to Ben. You can catch all of our content over at the Sunderland Echo website. And yeah, thanks again for tuning in to this On the Whistle video.